I always imagine there's a sense of relief when you've, especially when it's so close to the wire like this, to watch those episodes and to hear how well they've landed.
Yes, I mean, you never get the opportunity. This is the only time we sort of will see them with anybody else, so apart from our mums and dads telling us we're great. So it's lovely to hear that they get our reaction.
But Reece is saying, I'm annoyed when they laugh because then they're missing the next line. So.
Yeah.
Don't tell them that.
But it's true, like, you know, when the Netflix line landed, for example, there's a bit after that everybody missed because they're laughing, and you know, because I guess when you're watching it at home, you haven't got that kind of united experience.
Yeah. Silent.
Yeah. But you test the episodes out on your nearest and dearest when they've been picture locked, don't you?
Yeah, we do, yeah. Yeah, they've seen them all, yeah.
Make sure there are no logic holes or the endings can't
well,
be guessed.
it's interesting, yeah, you get, there's edits of things. These are not finished, and we're still in the process of finishing the Series 9, so, well, those are finished, but the rest are not.
Pretty nearly.
Yeah, so there's some things where you think, do you get that moment, you know? So it's hard, we can't tell anymore because we have it in our head as what we hope you will think. So it's good to get completely new eyes on it and just say, what did you make of that moment, you know? So people get that a bit if they know us, because we ask them to say, what did you understand? What point did you think this? But yeah, hard to know.
I think you can do anything as long as you put a Michael Ball voiceover on the end. It's a win.
And I mean, I touched on the fact at the start that you delivered these, I mean, as close to Boeing, literally, like the second episode, I think, came over the weekend. And even today, there were being changes made.
Yeah, so we were still working this morning on the episode with the train, just some last-minute little bits of polish that needed to be done. So you've got Friday's version. So Monday's, but today's version is slightly different. I mean, fractionally.
Now I've seen it on the big screen. There's a lot of work needs to be done on this. But maybe that's my problem.
Yeah, sure, probably. Yeah.
But I wonder, I mean, Adam, can I just ask you just to give us a little sort of time flow in terms of when these were filmed, when you've been kind of editing and what, you know.
Yeah, so these episodes were filmed just before Christmas. We filmed 3 before Christmas, 3 after Christmas. We started editing immediately after Christmas, pretty much. And then it takes us about 6 weeks of editing to lock them, and then about another 3 to 4 weeks of final post-production to finish them, if it all goes smoothly. And obviously we have to allow enough time for Christian Henson to do the amazing thing he does with his music. So all of that's got to be planned into the schedule. So we need to make sure that there's enough time for that to happen. And then there's grading, dubbing, onlining, me typing the credits, retyping the credits, correcting the credits. You know, that happens a lot because I'm pretty dyslexic when it comes to people's stuff.
So Mulberry Close was the first episode we watched. Yeah. And I wonder whether you can just tell us, what was the sort of was it the Ring doorbell? Was that the kind of the jumping off point, or what came first?
Yeah, I think it was. I think we were interested in a fixed viewpoint storytelling device, and we were sort of tossing up between the police body cam, which you see a lot now in these true crime dramas, which Netflix and other streaming services do a lot of. They tend to get a lot of found footage via, you know, we record so much in our lives now, but we settled on the Ring doorbell because we love that sort of fixed viewpoint sort of idea of telling a story through what happens, you know, in front of your eyes, and you have to be the detective then. You need to work out what's happening. We're not guiding you and showing you who to look at or what the focus is or what's going on inside the house. So that was the starting point, and then I don't know how we developed it from that point. It was we were keen to do a Rear Window-esque thing, weren't we?
Yeah, we thought that would be, yes, because it's inside. The number 9 is we're in it from and out looking out. So we thought, I think, yeah, the idea of the suspicious neighbours. There's a lot of things in it that I think people will recognise, like foxes and putting the bins out, and it's all very real. So there was a few more things in there, weren't there? Cut actually in the end.
Well, I think it was just a time because you've got this fixed camera. You can't go to another angle, so you can't shorten the time it takes to do a scene.
Yeah.
And if you go for the right performances, they're not necessarily the shortest ones. So we've ended up having to lead certain scenes, but actually those scenes gave away too much.
They were
Yeah,
all
possibly.
delivery drivers, weren't they?
Yeah,
Delivery driver and Amazon driver. And
yeah, delivering more alcohol for David
And then cleaning products.
and
for the
cleaning products.
supposed
yeah,
murder,
carpet cleaner.
And I guess the other thing that's kind of ingenious, but you make it more difficult for yourselves, is the fact that actually every scene effectively is one take, isn't it? I mean, you can't just kind of keep cutting away because it's just there.
Yeah, but that's the beauty of the episode. I mean, the premise is that proscenium, or that round proscenium, that porthole into suburban life, and it's all seen by this all-seeing eye.
We had the same problem we had when we did Cold Comfort, with as long for the takes having to be complete in there, and bolted together. So the longest take was probably the robbing of the house, wasn't it?
Yeah.
yeah, it's about 7 minutes, that scene, and we were like a little theatre company.
Yeah,
we all had, we were given cues, and everything had to happen in one go, and it was great fun, I have to say. It was really nice to know that you didn't have to then do the scene for coverage. You were just getting the perfect take. Yeah. And we shot it over 5 days, but probably we could have done it in 4, because sometimes you got it straight away and you could move on to the next scene. So we've loved on Inside Number 9, as you've seen, using the storytelling devices in different ways, and this was I think a really pleasing one. It's deceptively simple, but there's an awful lot going on in that episode.
Yeah, I mean, initially when I watched it, I remember thinking, it's at night time, and it's with that device, and actually how long can you sustain it? But it just draws you in. It's kind of like a little sort of fishing rod as you kind of get more and more absorbed. But I guess the thing that we do need to talk about, and I can barely contain myself as we do, is we need to talk about Popcorn the dog, don't we?
Yeah.
What on earth is going on there?
I know.
Well, it was ill anyway.
My brother's dog is called Popcorn. He's going to absolutely kill me when he sees it.
You know that in the UK you can do anything you like, anything apart from kill a dog. I mean, that's just such a and I always actually feel, as a dog lover, I always feel slightly anxious the moment I see a dog on screen. I think, and of
Don't be
course
such
my
a
worst
baby.
fears. Just reassure us, Popcorn's okay.
Yes, it was a brilliantly rendered model at the end. Yeah, Popcorn is fine.
All right, okay. I'm gonna accept that and move on. And just in terms of in terms of filming in kind of the cul-de-sac and so forth, how did that work kind of practically? Because you were doing night shoots as well as day shoots, presumably. So were people moving out of their house and moved to another part of their house, or?
Yeah, a little bit of that. Mostly we paid them enough money for the facility of using the space outside their house and the ability to say, don't turn a light on, shut your window, stay in the back of the house.
We had a strange day when we were filming one of the Amazon drivers arriving, and then a real Amazon driver arrived.
Yeah.
And the pretend one had to step out of the way, and the real one came inside the thing.
So did you have somebody stopping the traffic at during
Yes.
times when you were shooting
Yes.
as well?
Yeah.
Cul-de-sac, yeah.
And the cul-de-sac, the residents of the cul-de-sac were very, very long-suffering and really actually supported our work. We didn't have any trouble at
The
all.
funniest night was getting the person who brought the fox. Massive fat thing that just didn't want to eat anything. Because the trickery of it is I'm going to spoil it now, but the fox, there's 2 foxes in it, that's the same fox, doubled up. To look like
I didn't know that.
You didn't know that?
it?
We only had one
Yeah,
fox
because he went
scene.
home, it was a Friday night, he said, I'm going. I stayed and watched the rest of the filming. So it was 1 fox and they doubled it up. But he wouldn't eat the food, and there was a whole pantomime.
But it would wee over everything.
It weed
wouldn't
over everything. But the bins, it wouldn't touch the bins, would
No.
it? So they're on strings, and whenever it went slightly near it, they pulled the bin over, and it just about looks like it's done it, but it hasn't. It never touched it. It was fat.
Did you
So
get
yeah,
to-
fox wrangler.
Did you get to meet Michael Ball?
Michael very kindly did it. So we wrote that ending thinking, let's just hope he will do it, and he was very game. So yes,
Yeah.
it's good.
Yeah. Bless him.
And then in terms of Boo to a Goose, obviously shot in my neck of the woods, actually, on the Wirral line there, at Moorfields going there. But how did that work in terms of practical kind of filming? I mean, presumably you had to close the station down. What happened? Did you have to go at night time, or?
We had a night, an afternoon.
We had a Sunday where we were filming on an actual live station where people getting on and off
should
the
have seen
train.
people looking at him.
It's in Liverpool. They didn't bat an eyelid.
They wouldn't.
And so we had to grab guerrilla style the shots we needed as people were getting on and off the real train. it almost didn't feel like a real filming day, did it?
No.
Because
Well, you could only have a very small number of people there on the platform for safety reasons, and George had quite a long shot list, as it turned out, of the shots he wanted to get with a real train, and the driver had to keep taking breaks and change round shape because of shifts and things. So the amount of work we had to do was disproportionate, really, in terms of the resources we had to cover it. So it was all a bit of a scramble. But, you know, thanks to Matt Green from Locations and Steve Wright, our producer, you know, the conversations we had with Merseyrail were, you know, they were difficult in the sense that they weren't really sure what we wanted to do, and I think they weren't quite sure they wanted to hand it over their entire rail system to us. But in the end, they cooperated, and it was a very smooth morning's work.
And it's a proper ensemble. I mean, I know one of the great things about Number 9, obviously you have these two-handers occasionally, but when you've got that kind of great, kind of really high quality ensemble cast, it's just like magic, isn't it?
yeah, it's brilliant because in the edit, then you've got choices. Everywhere you look, you've got choices. Not only the people's dialogue, but all the reactions to what was going on. It was a really fun week, wasn't it? Yeah. I got a bit irritated by my boob rack, so I was a bit preoccupied with the rash going on under my latex thing that I'd been basically laminated in.
But that can't have been unusual for you. I mean, that's every weekend, pretty much, isn't it? The Pemberton household.
Well, that's between me and you. So sometimes there's those physical things that affect how you are when you're filming. But I could see just from looking around, just that group of actors that we had, that we'd hit gold with that episode.
Yeah.
So it was a really fun one to film, a really fun one to edit as well. And I think it came together in an interesting way. We actually had been talking about setting one on a train since series 1, hadn't we?
Yeah.
And in fact, the very first meeting we had about Inside Number 9, we talked to Janice Hadlow, who's the controller of BBC, bless you, controller of BBC Two, who commissioned the show. And she said, well, because it's such an unusual thing, Inside Number 9, because what is it? It's whatever we come up with week on week. It's not... It doesn't have anything binding these episodes together. And we were in this meeting trying to think off the top of our heads, and we went, well, we saw this couple on a train once, and they got apples out of a bag and passed it one to the wife, and they both ate their apples.
It's not a good pitch, is it?
No. It's not. But somehow it works.
2 people eating apples together.
And they were in cagoules, weren't they?
And they were in cagoules, yeah.
In matching cagoules.
And you used half that idea in the Bones of St. Nicholas.
It's been very kind to me. Yeah, we did. We used half of the idea.
You spun it out into 2 episodes.
So every series, we'd look at the notebooks and go, can we do anything with these 2 people eating apples on a tube? There's got to be a story in it. But we also had this thought that it could be a kind of 12 Angry Men-esque group of people who become a kind of jury. Something happens on the train that they have to work out between themselves. And so that was our kicking off point, really.
Just in terms of looking back, 'cause obviously we've been lucky enough to any members of the audience who have been coming to these events over the last 10 years. And back in the very first series, I remember in this room, I think we watched Sardines and The Harrowing back in the day. But I wonder, when you look back on the sort of series, we've got 55 episodes, and obviously there are some episodes we haven't watched yet, but in terms of the ones that we're aware of, are there episodes that you are particularly proud of when you look back? That you think that for you that's the one that worked best, or was the happiest experience, or whatever it might be?
It's really hard. I should have thought about this, shouldn't we?
Well, no, because there are different ways of looking at
Yeah,
it. I'm very proud of having managed to cobble together all the antique equipment to make The Devil of Christmas, which was a massive undertaking and nearly went wrong, but we got away with it. But then, compare that to the effect that, say, the 12 Days of Christine had on the audience. And that's a completely different reason for loving an episode, because the audience took it to their hearts and bawled its heart out for days afterwards, and still has an effect on people.
And is it true, Steve, that you have a ranking of all the episodes from 1 to 55?
I just did that to annoy Reece. But I did do it. I haven't shared it with Reece yet. No, I don't have them all because I haven't put Series 9 in there.
Okay, but
It becomes ridiculous because you get to like what's 26th and what's 27th in your ranking.
what is 26th and 27th in your ranking?
I'll have to look at it.
Have
on
you
my
got it?
phone, but no, I haven't got it.
Okay.
I got rid of it.
Yeah,
You can't. It's an impossible question. I mean, we're proud of all of them. Genuinely proud of all of them. Certain ones stand out, and I think ones where we've tried to do something different, like the live episode. To me, the Deadline episode, which was such an exhilarating thing to do. The Zanzibar, the rhyming, couplet episode. But I think in terms of us laughing and finding it fun, I always remember.
That's never happened.
Well, it did once.
Yes.
We had there's two in
Remind
my
me?
mind. We were doing the scene in To Have and To Hold. A very broadly comic episode, but Nicola Walker we were doing a sort of sex role play, and she was dressed up as a nurse and had to try and rouse me into the character, I should say. And we were filming it. I was crying with laughter at her face, trying to coax some life into this thing. And Reece said, "It doesn't look realistic enough. You've got to have something for her to tug on." So, because she was just miming it, so they got a pair of rolled up socks, safety pinned it to my actual pants. And as we were doing the scene, I could just feel this kind of pulling. And so that was something I'll never forget.
And probably nor your children. Your children are here tonight, I think, aren't they?
Yes.
Nor will they now.
No. I mean, I loved reading the comments on that, and someone said, "I'm sitting here watching this on my own, and I don't know where to look." And I thought that was a very good summation of that scene.
What about you? I don't know whether you want to be drawn into this game, Reece, but are there any episodes that you could share that you feel fondly about or rate highly enough, or are they all so good?
No, it is really hard. I mean, they're all, we've spent such a lot of our time the last 10 years thinking of these stories. So it really is, you can't dismiss any of them in our minds, and the execution of them,
and also the individual contribution of the actors involved.
I mean, I always say it, but probably my favourite, because it's one of my sort of interests, is the Witchfinder one with David Warner.
Are you only saying
and
that
Jim?
Jim?
No, I'm not. I would have said it anyway without Jim. So that one and the magic one, the misdirection, is enjoyable because it was part of.
And Jim Howick is particularly good in that episode.
Yes, he is. Yes, we were doing the lines in the green room, reminiscing of remembering David Warner being so funny in it. But that was a favourite.
And since we were last on this stage for Series 8, we hadn't had the episode that was going to be called, in everybody's mind, Hold On Tight. It ended up being 3x3. Can you just tell us a little bit about that? I mean, first of all, the whole thing about actually bringing in Robin Asquith and making those, making the sort of, all those photos that were taken and the campaign around that. I mean, that's an incredible thing to have gone to.
That was just a massive cover story.
Yeah.
Because we had to hide the quiz show episode in plain sight. So something had to be there, basically, in its place as a placeholder until we could get the quiz show to air. I mean, you guys were just saying, "Oh, can we just put it out in an afternoon on BBC One, something as a daytime quiz?"
Or just call it 3x3, like.
Just have it completely separate from
the
the series.
initial idea was to put
thing.
it on where you wouldn't, and you didn't know it was in the slot of Inside Number 9, so there was no possible way of knowing.
And somehow, for some reason, I couldn't get that past BBC Two. I can't think why they didn't go for that.
So intractable. Anyway.
And the pacemakers of Middle England at that point.
So in order to get our audience to that show, which was not Inside Number 9, we had to put something in its place as a placeholder. And then between us, we just came up with the kind of like almost the worst possible Inside Number 9 episode you can think of.
Or the best.
Or the best. Or the best.
We'll never know, I guess.
The unseen Hold On Tight.
Yeah, the idea of setting one on a bus, because that, of course, is...
And then it's a small...
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, and it's a small lie that then just gets bigger, because you think, well, hang on a moment, we're going to have something in the trail, and we're going to have a poster, and we're going to have some guests, we're going to have announce a guest star.
So fully aware of everyone's script, those that care, I mean, you lot probably, scrutinising every beat of a trailer for what episode is what. I know you all do it.
What was
we were like,
scary
we've got
was
to put in something of this pretend one.
we had done a photo shoot as the characters, what were we called, Wolfie and Clark, from Hold On Tight, and we said we need to film a little clip for the trailer to make it look like this is a real episode, and we filmed it on the set of Love Is a Stranger, which we were filming at the time, and someone had spotted that the wallpaper was the same behind Matt Horn as was it now a thing, so they were onto it. Someone here was onto it, and we were scared that it would be blown, but it was amazing, watching that go out online and on social media. The confusion it sowed was just delicious, and I always think that's then becomes part of the program. The reaction to it becomes part of the narrative of it. And
were you both on set when it was being filmed?
3x3.
Yeah.
We were. We split up, and Reece was in the gallery, and I was on the floor. And it was really, really exciting. We filmed it all on a green screen set, so there was not a single part of that set that wasn't created digitally. The podiums and everything.
Wow.
And we got, a lot of actors who were less familiar on TV to be the contestants. And we said to Lee, because we didn't write it for Lee, we just wrote it generically for a presenter. You tell us what you would do if you were presenting the 1 o'clock club, 1% club. And he brought so much to it. He improvised with the contestants. There's so much funny stuff we had to cut out, wasn't there?
Yeah, really.
And I think we could get a little 32 episode commission for that.
Yeah,
for 3x3.
Good. You could, especially if somebody's head explodes every week. That's used to it is. When you look back over all those years, and obviously there were twists and turns in every story, and you have to kind of keep those secrets. But there are some particular episodes like Deadline or like 3x3, or I guess like when you brought David and Maureen back.
Yeah, Death Be Not
from
Proud. Yeah,
Psychoville.
that was a hard secret to keep. Because
But can you just tell us about that whole thing about kind of keeping that secret within the crew and with anybody who kind of on that need to know?
Well, like a lot of big feature films, you start using code names and you change the title of something and you hide details on call sheets and covers of scripts, so it's just not plain. And you're just relying on everybody just to play along and to save the surprise, because it would be so easy for it to get out.
Once it's out, obviously the whole thing.
And once it's out, it's out, yeah.
What was the code name for Deadline? Was it Zodiac?
No, Project Gemini.
Project Gemini.
Who thought of that?
I remember the code.
It was a day. It was a terrible day, but I thought no one will
like
ever.
a 70s
Project Gemini.
Nobody will want
Sapphire and Steel program.
Yeah, but I think
What's wrong with that?
it was Maidstone, and we were supposed to be in Manchester, so I had to do something that was completely different.
And the code name for 3x3 was even worse.
Gift wrap.
Gift wrap.
Well, the mad thing about that was it was called gift wrap on the scripts that were lying around everywhere, with right above it, inside number 9. So explain that.
I'm afraid the producer isn't here to answer.
In a moment, I'm going to open up and see if anyone wants to ask you a question. But before we do, I just want to ask you something you're going to be asked a lot over the next few months. So we might as well just get it out in the open, and somebody else will ask you otherwise anyway. But what is meant? So you've talked about kind of a pausing of the show, and it's coming to an end at the end of Series 9. There are no plans necessary to do anything immediately. But what's that mean? Does that mean it could end up being, I don't know, a feature film, or you've talked about potentially in the past a stage production, or could it be one-off specials? I mean, could you see it kind of living on in a format at some point in the future?
No.
Well, no. Very sadly. I mean, we've got things possible that could happen, but not with this.
But as things stand.
As things stand, it is the end of Inside Number 9.
I think you might need to explain that to some people.
There was a line in Stakeout where we talk about some goths coming over from Leeds, and that was a reference to a scene in The League of Gentlemen with the dog cinema, where Mark played the diminutive owner of the dog cinema, who was very happy because he had a good triple bill of, Cujo, Lassie, and Zoltan Hound of Dracula. And he had some goths coming over from Leeds. I don't know, I think Jeremy was a goth and he's from Leeds, so I think we'll pin that one on Jeremy Dyson.
There are elements of things. I mean, there was a musical episode that was not done through various logistic reasons.
Money reasons.
Yeah.
Was it written?
Yes. And there was another one that but I can't talk about that other one because it might become something else. But yeah, so there have been a few things. I mean, we've done a lot of ideas. Why are you asking about them? 55 episodes. Well, what didn't you do?
I'm not sure it's fully changed because, as I said earlier, sometimes we go back to ideas we had 10 years ago. We work on them. But I think the process has got a little bit quicker. We make decisions a bit quicker now as to how we are going to develop a story. But equally, having the weight of all the other series on our backs makes it harder to do something that's surprising for you, the audience. So I don't know if the process has changed that much. It's always been tricky and hard, and that's one of the reasons why we think it's correct to stop now, because we think we're still doing things at a high level. We're still producing surprising. I mean, who saw that coming with the bloody train at the end? Didn't see that coming, did you? So as long as we're still delivering those surprises to the audience. And
I got it when they said replacement service.
I think the fear is different. Well, I think when we started, it was from as far as I was concerned, it was, can we do this? And also, how do we do this? And now we know that we can we know we can do it, and we sort of know how to do it. But it's, if we do it, will it still be as good? And that's the thing I worry about now. But actually, on the strength of those, I think we pulled it off.
Well, I think story is the first thing that we think about more than the characters. Or sometimes we'll have a strange day where we do think, what would you like to play as a character? But that really comes from the situation you find that character in. So it's always about the story first, and then we'll decide who are these people that are going to be involved in this tale, and what do you need them to be for the story to work. So then they're sort of linked in the way that the story informs what kind of people you'll have in it. But then it becomes practical. Like you think I've done that kind of character before. I mean, it's impossible now to not feel like you're sort of revisiting things that we've done in the past. But for example, I don't know if you know, but sometimes I've done quite angry characters. But yeah, I don't know. We just talk about the stories really first.
Yeah, we don't have plans really, because we are obviously trying to finish this series off. But I think we definitely would like to work together again on something else. Yeah. We're very wary of giving out, details of future projects or future things. So you'll just have to wait and see. But it's not the end.
Well, that's good to
Amber
hear.
Smith.
Okay.
We don't have a set way of doing things, but I think sometimes it's the limitations you put on your storytelling that give you new ideas and force you to be creative. I think it was really instructive when we did an episode of Psychoville that was, for budgetary reasons, set in one room with 3 characters, and we couldn't get any information other than what those characters had in that room. We found it really exhilarating to write in that way. And so that was part of the ethos of Inside Number 9. We'll always limit a small set and a smallish cast. But in terms of how we use, we enjoyed doing a silent episode in series 1. People really responded to that. And obviously, we'd set out in that instance with the intention of writing with no dialogue. And we found that really exhilarating as well. So it's about making bold choices and being brave. And who'd have thought you could sit and watch one single doorbell camera for half an hour and still get so much from it? So if we are going to do something that's outside of the norm, we normally think of that concept first, but not always. I remember doing Zanzibar. We wanted to do a farce in a hotel. We were talking about the stock characters in the farce and all the different doors opening, and we just kind of went, meh, it's like, what's different from this to any other farce? And it was unlocking turning it into a kind of iambic pentameter, Shakespearean-influenced comedy that brought that to life. So similarly with The Devil of Christmas, we were doing a story about the Krampus myth. And again, we're like, well, what's the difference between this and any Krampus film that you see? So that's when we made the decision to turn it into a 70s-style thriller episode. So there's no right or wrong in any of this. You just put ideas out there and see which ones stick.
Sometimes the script is just a really good script, and you bring a style.
Sometimes.
Well, there isn't a starting point in terms of style, and you have to impose a style book on it. But the thing to do is to make sure that the style book suits the story, so that we have, sort of in the first series we had ones that were like Pinter or Akeborn or something like that. So you're trying to match the style of the story to the style of production, and that's something that I would like to credit to David Kerr, if he's here. Is David here? There you are, David, our director from Series 1. And we worked very hard to make 6 very different stories, and having decided that there was no house style, we've obviously carried on doing that.
I just want to say, there's nobody else who has made a show like this. People have tried over the last 10 years and they've not succeeded. There's been some very obvious ones in America and stuff which have just popped up and gone away. But you've absolutely led the line. I think the reason for that is that every single one of these 55 stories is completely original. You've obviously got kind of completely sort of set out with a blank canvas every time, and that's really apparent. And huge testimony to the testament to the both, to all three of you, that it's been recommissioned 9 times, which is not a given. I mean, it's pretty unprecedented.
8 times.
8 times. Sorry, you're quite right. But just want to say a big thank you on behalf of everybody here for such an incredible 10 years. Thank you so much to Adam, Reece, and Steve. Thank you.